I want to bring in MS Now's Ali Vitali, who's on Capitol Hill. John Sandweg is a former acting director for ICE. Mark Leibovich is a staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political contributor. Veronica Cardenas previously served as ICE's assistant chief counsel. She's with me here in studio. Ali, give us the big picture. Tell us more about how this hearing unfolded.
Look, this was always going to be an intense hearing, Chris. The first time that ICE and CBP officials are coming before a congressional panel that has, frankly, a lot of valid questions for them that they are here to ask on behalf of a concerned American public who watched video from multiple angles on the ground in Minneapolis weeks ago of the shooting deaths of Renee Good and then Alex Preddy after. That's the very impetus for having this hearing in the first place. And what we've seen over the course of the last several hours is that the questions have gone from pretty granular, establishing that only about half of ICE agents have body cameras to allow the kind of transparency that lawmakers are demanding now. But then we've also seen it get only more intense, lawmakers drawing some troubling and concerning historical parallels amid their line of questioning. I'll play for you just one of those that happened in the last half hour or so from Congressman Dan Goldman of New York. Watch.
There's numerous well-documented instances of people, American citizens, being asked to show and prove their citizenship. Do you know what other regimes in the 20th century required similar proof of citizenship?
Yes, sir.
What?
Sir, there was various nefarious regimes that did that.
Is Nazi Germany one?
Yes, but
Is the Soviet Union one?
I honestly,
sir, I'm asking the questions. Is the Soviet Union one?
Yes, sir, but I totally, this is the wrong type of questioning.
I'll tell you what the wrong type of
actually,
thing
sir,
is. Sir, it's
the
my
Holocaust
time.
Museum
Reclaiming my time, sir.
If you want to
reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman.
It's not the men and women of ICE that are out there doing it every day.
You said in your opening statement that references to ICE as the Gestapo or the secret police encourages threats against ICE agents.
100%.
The problem is you have it backwards, sir. People are simply making valid observations about your tactics, which are un-American and outright fascist. So I have a simple suggestion. If you don't want to be called a fascist regime or secret police, then stop acting like one.
Chris, that was just one of the most intense moments that we've seen amid several other examples that we could have pulled out here from this hearing. And I think if we just take a step back and recognize that this hearing is coming as members of Congress are trying to put together some kind of bipartisan solution that would put guardrails on ICE as the mass deportation effort of this Trump administration continues on the ground, I think that this hearing only underscores the ways the two parties are pretty far apart when it comes to even just how they view the deportation effort on its face and how they view what has happened on the ground in Minneapolis. I think that a lot has been spoken, and certainly in my source conversations, I hear this, about Republicans who privately have concerns, but publicly are participating in hearings like this without airing those concerns. You hear it in the way that these officials from DHS are using even just different language, dehumanizing language to talk about these immigrant populations, and you bring it back to policy and this demand for accountability and for a building that has to work in bipartisan fashion. I just think this hearing shows the bottom has sort of fallen out on this issue of immigration. It has always been a hot button, but I think what's happened on the ground in Minneapolis in recent months and weeks has only underscored the need for just some common sense moment to pause and take stock of how this effort is being done. And the fact that members in this committee are sort of showcasing the political divide that remains only goes to show us why it's so difficult to put guardrails that might seem common sense in place in the first instance, and why the politics and the morality are just so messed up and balled up in this ball of yarn up here on Capitol Hill. This hearing just only further exemplifies that. Chris?
Yeah, and how difficult it will be to come to some sort of understanding. So, John, these officials claim that ICE and CBP agents are well trained, that they understand and respect people's constitutional rights, that they do not separate families. Those were some of their statements. Do the facts on the ground support those contentions?
Well, Chris, I mean, I think it's hard to say that those are fully accurate based on everything we've seen at this point. Look, at the end of the day, these agents are extensively trained. That part is true. The problem is they're just not trained to deal with these circumstances that they're encountering in Minneapolis. And as I've said before, what is really concerning to me and certainly lots of other former DHS officials I speak with is this idea of moving Border Patrol agents up off the border and putting them in an urban environment, which is just a radically different operating environment than they're used to. And then you have them task them with actually trying to police these protesters. Again, something that they aren't trained to do, and they don't encounter when they're out there operating in the Southwest desert. We've all seen the results, right? These incredibly aggressive confrontations. Federal courts have expressed concerns that they're violating their First Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights. But all of that is a byproduct of what was very predictable, which is that moving 1,000 Border Patrol agents and tasking with these functions is going to result in the scenes like we saw in Minneapolis.
Mark, I want to play the officials defending the actions of their agents and rejecting comparisons to authoritarian regimes.
Agents are increasingly facing an unprecedented level of aggressive interference and intimidation when executing the laws that you have asked them to enforce. These attacks on federal law enforcement personnel are coordinated and well-funded. This is not peaceful protest. No law enforcement officer should be put at personal risk simply for doing the job that we have asked them to do.
Let me send a message to anyone who thinks they can intimidate us. You will fail. Despite these perils, our officers continue to execute their mission with unwavering resolve, and we are only getting started.
And yet polls show more than 60% of Americans believe ICE has gone too far. So how do you think people are going to receive the idea that ICE agents are the ones under siege here?
Well, I mean, it's not backed up by the reality that everyone's experiencing on video. I mean, this is not theoretical. This is not something that is just a product of a speech you hear in a congressional hearing. This is something that is being brought home on a fairly regular basis, daily in some ways, from the streets of Minneapolis, from the front lines of this. And that is not a good look for anyone, particularly the agents involved here. It does not look like a well-trained and organized environment. It looks very chaotic. And I will say also, I mean, I think a hearing like this kind of, in some kind of dispiriting way, reflects that chaos within the halls of Congress. I mean, I do, I've been watching these things for a long, long time, many, many years. And I still don't really understand what the speechifying does when you sort of spend so much time trying to get people under oath to answer questions, and then you don't really get too much of a pointed exchange. We saw some exceptions earlier, especially from Congressman Goldman, maybe Swalwell, and a couple of others. But ultimately, I mean, I think this reads as a little bit more performative than it needs to be. And I do sort of wonder if Democrats might tempt a little bit, not backlash, that's probably too strong a word, but I do think you wonder what the value of this is after a while, and if people might not just tune this out.
Well, I think to your point, those polls do show that the American people are looking for answers. So, Veronica, the Oklahoma Congressman Brecheen argued, and this has kind of been a consistent argument from the administration, look, we're doing what Donald Trump was elected to do, which is to get dangerous criminals off the streets. They put up photos often of people. I don't know if they are people who have been convicted or accused of crimes, but they put the crimes underneath. Do they have a point?
I think when it comes to safety as a public right now, we have to ask, are we safer now than we were 2 years ago? We've seen Americans being shot in broad daylight. There's no investigations. We've seen the deaths in detention centers rise. One person, Seamus, an Irishman, told The Guardian that he felt like the prison guards are the people that he was scared of. And so people are scared to go out to eat, people of color, people with accents, people in mixed status families. That's one point. The other point is that this administration is making it an either-or issue. We can have safe borders, or Americans can be safe and we can preserve the constitutional rights. They're making this an either-or issue. It should not be an either-or issue. It never was. It was, we can have safe borders and we can protect Americans and preserve our constitutional rights and the courts as they stand. And so when they're showing those pictures, that is nothing new. Every administration has always gone for the worst of the worst. They've gone for people who have gone through the criminal system or have been arrested and accused of horrific crimes, and then they go into the immigration system and they are deported. That is the process. What they're doing now is just for show. If they were really interested in getting the worst of the worst, they would invest that time into technology, getting fingerprints from other countries, facial recognition from other countries, so that when people present themselves at the border, there's more ability to say what their history has been.
So, John, do you think there are questions that need to be answers that, at least from what you've heard, lawmakers haven't asked?
Chris, absolutely. I want to see data from Minneapolis. I think this is critically important. We need to know who was being arrested. Where the public has a right to decide, was it worth it? Right? And that data needs to break down not just the individuals, like you said, you see these worst of the worst. I want to know where those individuals were arrested. Were those individuals arrested, handed over from the Minnesota prison system? Were they arrested in jails? Were they at-large arrests? But I want to see the macro level data. I just know, based on experience, working at DHS and ICE for 5 years, that when you look at these operations, they are not likely to yield a high level of criminal aliens. Two would be that we see these cases, whether it's Liam Ramos's case or we see the court order regarding 100 refugees that were inexplicably arrested, even though they had legal status. But, Chris, if there's one thing I think Congress should mandate, it is timely and accurate data from ICE regarding who's being arrested, where they're being arrested, and what their criminal history is, including whether they've been charged or convicted or what offense. Only then can the public judge whether these scenes are worth it and whether it is, as the administration has said, necessary in order to protect public safety, or is this more about grabbing asylum seekers and padding stats?